to the JavaScript section of the Complete Web Developer course. Here's your final look at the BBC website that hopefully you created at the end of the last section. It's a reminder that everything that we've done so far has been focused on layout and design and style. Other than a very little bit of interaction with forms, we haven't been able to make our websites do anything. And that's what JavaScript is all about. It allows you to make your websites interactive, which will make the user experience a lot better and allow you to create things like games, apps, and web apps that hopefully your users will love. It's also our first look at proper coding. What I mean by that is we can start making software and programs that do something rather than just look a certain way. So it's a big move, a big shift, a lot to learn, but also really exciting. I'm going to just show you very quickly how easy it is to get started with a little bit of JavaScript. And we'll do this in the usual way. So I'm going to say goodbye to my bbc.html page. And I'm going to create a new folder, which I'm going to call 3 JavaScript, and then I'll just call it javascript.html, and that's the main file that we'll be working with. There we go. So we'll change the title to JavaScript, get rid of the style sheet link, which won't work now anyway, and then go back to the start. Almost painful to delete all that code, but it was good fun. Okay, so very quick challenge for you. Can you make this new page appear in your browser? You should be a master of that by now. All right, hope you managed it. All we need to do is update the URL to 3-JavaScript and then javascript.html. There we go, blank page, but you can see the title up there. All right, so I'm going to show you a very simple way to get a little bit of JavaScript up and running, and we're going to use a button. This is an HTML element that we haven't actually seen yet, but it does exactly what you might think. So it's much like a submit button that we saw in the forms section of the HTML chapter, but by default it doesn't do anything. You have to give it some code to make it do something. So let's tempt our user by putting the words "click me" into the button. Let's have a look. There's our button. So we click it and of course nothing happens. So how do we add our JavaScript? Well, just like with CSS, there's 3 different ways that we can put JavaScript into our websites. And they're exactly the same 3 different ways as with CSS. So the first that I'm going to show you is the simplest, but not the one I'd recommend long term, but it will get us started. So this is inline JavaScript. And instead of, you remember we used style before to get some CSS, we use onClick to get some JavaScript. So this just means that we're going to execute this bit of JavaScript when the button is clicked. Simple as that. And then we put the JavaScript that we're going to execute into these quotes. And a nice simple command is alert. And then we have some parentheses or brackets. And in single quotes, I'm going to put hi. So slightly complicated, but you'll get the idea hopefully. So this command means alert. And then we have some brackets to contain the instructions about what we want to alert. And in single quotes there, I've put the word hi with an exclamation mark. So this should alert the word hi. What exactly does that mean? Let's run it and find out. There it is. So we get a little pop-up that says hi with a load of nonsense at the beginning, but we can ignore that for now. So feel free to experiment with that a little bit. You can essentially put any text you like there, or numbers, or anything else, and it will appear when the button is clicked. So that's your first teensy bit of JavaScript and a little bit of interaction between your user and your website. In the next video, we'll switch from inline to internal JavaScript, which is going to be a move very similar to the one that we made when we did CSS in the previous chapter. Alright, so you've now written your first bit of JavaScript, and this is, as I've mentioned, inline JavaScript, which is a very easy way to get it up and running, but not generally the way I'd recommend doing it. For exactly the same reasons we avoided inline CSS, it's just very messy. Just in the same way that we want to keep our style and our content different, we want to keep our logic or our code or our JavaScript different from our content as well. So the way we do that is very similar to how we put in our style. We just use script. There we go. And any JavaScript that we put in here will then be executed as soon as the page loads. Now that will work in itself, but it's considered correct to put the correct type just to make it really clear that this is JavaScript that we want the browser to execute. So very quick challenge for you then. Can you write a little bit of JavaScript here to pop up the page is loaded or something similar once you reload the page? Go for it. Did you manage it? The challenge was possibly you might have included the onClick command. And if you did, no worries. But the JavaScript itself is actually just the alert part, and then whatever text you want inside the quotes there. So that's it. That's all you needed. Let's just save that and refresh the page. So you can see I just did a refresh there. I didn't click the button, but that JavaScript was executed. A quick note about single and double quotes. I used single quotes here because we had double quotes around the edge of the onClick attribute. So if I'd used double quotes in there, that would have got very confused because the system would have thought that this double quote was supposed to end this bit of text rather than start a new one. So if you want to have quotes within quotes, as we've got here, then you need to use double and single. But here, we don't have quotes within quotes, so you can use double or single. And double is slightly more conventionally correct these days, even though both will work exactly the same. Single is only really used when we have to use it. If we're just using some quotes, double quotes is the standard. While we're here as well, just like CSS, JavaScript has an optional semicolon at the end. You don't need it, but you can put it there, and that will enable you to put several different commands on one line if you want to. So I'd recommend getting into the habit of putting semicolons at the end of your lines, but it's up to you. One more thing I want to show you while we're here is the Chrome console, which is really handy for debugging your JavaScript. So let's go back to, I just right-clicked or control-clicked on the page and click Inspect, like you may have done a few times if you followed along the BBC CSS project with me. And then if we go over and click Console. So the console gives you two powerful tools. First off, you can actually write JavaScript straight into it. So alert, hello, is our one bit of JavaScript that we know. And then that then is actually run on that page itself. So that can be really handy if you want to check a particular command. But probably more usefully is it will show you if you've got errors in your JavaScript. So if I make a mistake and instead of alert I type ert, then first off, if I run the page, let's just get rid of the console. If I run the page, notice nothing happens. I don't get an error message or anything, just nothing happens. And that's what will happen. If there's an error in your script, you won't get an error message on the page itself. It just won't do anything. And that can be really frustrating. But if we have a look in the console, you can see we've got a lovely error message there. Ert is not defined. So we're trying to use a command that doesn't exist. So I have no doubt that while you're making pages and practicing with JavaScript, you'll make mistakes and you'll have errors in your code. And the Chrome console is a really good way to see what they are. It even tells you what line your error is at. So line 15, it takes you straight there, and then you should be able to see straight away, aha, yes, of course, I've just spelt that wrong. And then you run it again, your error disappears, and your code works. So I'd recommend using that, and I'll definitely refer to it throughout the course as well. Notice that you can put your script code up in the head there, and in some situations that's a good idea, and we'll see some of those later on in this section. But generally, for the first section at least, we're going to be primarily putting our code at the end of the page like that, and that means that it will get executed as soon as the page is run, and which for most of these examples, that's what we want. All right, so enough introduction, let's get started and start writing some real JavaScript. So now that we've seen how to run some JavaScript in an internal way, we're going to see how we can start interacting with elements on the page. But at the moment, all we're doing is alerting something. So that's a pop-up which tells the user something. But very often, of course, what we want is for our code to affect something that appears on the screen itself. So let's get rid of our button and type in anything we like. So I'll go back to the good old standard hello world. And then let's just run that and make sure that that's updated. There we go. And of course we get our pop-up as well. So what if we wanted, using JavaScript, to update the contents of this paragraph tag and change the text to something else? That's a basic example of something we might want to do in a real life page. For example, if we've got a login form and someone clicks the login button without having entered their details, it would be a useful thing to show them a message to tell them to enter their details. And this is how we would do that. So let's get rid of our alert instruction and see how we access this element here. Now, as you may remember, the classes and IDs that we used in CSS, I mentioned, can also be used in JavaScript. And IDs in particular are very powerful because the thing about IDs is they refer uniquely to an element. So it's very easy in JavaScript to get an element by its ID. So let's give this paragraph text an ID of text. And now let's find out the JavaScript for selecting that and doing something with it. So we start off by typing the keyword document. So document tells the JavaScript that we're going to be looking for something inside this document. Make sense? And then we use a dot to go within the document, and then we want to get an element by its ID. So you've got that top one there, and you could imagine maybe what those other ones might be used for as well. But we're going to go for get element by ID, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It gets an element by its ID. Notice also the capitalization here, because we're going to be using this throughout our use of JavaScript. This is common to many programming languages, where we start with a small letter, and then each word in the function name has the first letter capitalized. So we've got get is all small, element begins with a capital E, by with a capital B, and ID with a capital I. So that's just quite a nice way of making it readable without putting in spaces or hyphens or anything nasty like that. Alright, so this instruction will get an element by its ID. We need to tell it the ID of the element that we want. So we put in brackets, and you can see my text editor here is telling me that we need a string, which isn't the ID. So a string is just a bunch of characters. So it goes in double quotes as we're used to, and then we just put in the ID. So this will now get the element text by its ID. So we've now got the element that we want to change. How do we change it? Well, we add another dot, and then we use the instruction inner HTML. And this gets, as you might imagine, the inner HTML of this element with ID of text. And we want to change that to something else. So we set it equal to, and then whatever string we want. So maybe I want to change it to hello Rob, rather than hello world. And that's our full instruction. So there's quite a lot of new stuff in there, so take a moment to just go back and make sure you understand what each of those bits are doing. I'm going to just quickly recap it for you. Document means that we're going to get something within the document that we're working in, so that's this whole HTML document here. And then get element by ID says that we want to get an element within the document by its ID. Then we pass the ID that we're interested in, which is text. And then we want to get the inner HTML of that element, which at the moment is hello world. And then we want to set it equal to something else, i.e. in this case, hello Rob. That's it. And remember, we've got an optional semicolon, and I'd recommend putting semicolons at the end, but it will work without them. All right, let's have a look. So if we now save that and run it, you can see we've got hello Rob right there. So it might not look that exciting, but what we've managed to do there is actually change the content of our page using JavaScript. So that's a really powerful thing to be able to do. One quick thing to show you before we move on is comments within JavaScript. And this can be very useful as you're writing your code to leave comments to remind yourself later on what your code is actually doing. Or if someone else is going to be editing your script or looking at your code, it can be very useful to them as well. So there's a couple of ways to add comments in JavaScript, and they're common to pretty much every programming language out there, which is great. So if you want to have a one-line comment, you add a double / there. And then if we just run that again, it's no different at all. It still works. We still get hello Rob, but obviously the comment doesn't do anything. So you can write whatever text you like there. Secondly, if you want to add a multi-line comment, you do a / and then a star to begin the multi-line comment. And you can see that this is now commented out, this part here as well, which we don't want. So we have to end the multi-line comment, and we do that with a star and a /. So now we can put whatever we like in between those two, and it will be considered a comment. It won't be processed with the code. So we put something like this is a multi-line comment. And we can put whatever we like in there, as many lines as we want. So just to check, once again, its code still works. We haven't broken anything. All right. So that's how you do both one-line and multi-line comments in JavaScript, and it's also how we change the content of our page using JavaScript. Of course, doing that on the page load is not necessarily that exciting because we can't actually see it happen because it happens so fast we never see the hello world. So in the next video, we'll see how we can use buttons to process JavaScript on demand, i.e. when the button is pressed. But we know how to change the content of a web page using HTML. We're going to attempt to do that using a button. So rather than updating it as soon as the page is loaded, we're going to have a button, and then when that button is pressed, that's when we'll update the inner HTML. And that of course starts adding some genuine interactivity with our pages rather than just running some code as soon as the page is run. So try and remember this. I'm going to get rid of it now, but you're going to need to type it in a challenge that I give you in a minute. So try and have that in your mind. What I'm going to do is after the hello world paragraph, I'm going to add in a button which is going to have the words change text. There we go. And this is the button that we're going to press to update the text here. Obviously it doesn't do anything yet. But in order to refer to it in our JavaScript, we're going to give it an ID, just as before. So we can call this whatever we like. I'll call it my button. All right, so that's all we need on the HTML side. Here comes the first mini challenge then. Can you select the button by its ID? So just in the same way that we did in the previous video, when we selected the text paragraph, can you select the button by its ID in JavaScript? Go for it. All right, hope you remembered how to do it. You should have started with document to say that we want to get something within this document, and then get element by ID. That's the key command that we need in this case. And then, of course, the ID is my button. There we go. So that's what you should have come up with. You didn't need the inner HTML because all we wanted to do was select the button, and we've done that now. So how do we then connect some JavaScript to this button? Well, we don't want to change the inner HTML of the button, but what we do want to do is add an on click. So we do that using .onClick. And this is effectively the same as writing an onClick instruction right there as we did a couple of videos ago. But it's much cleaner because we're using internal JavaScript rather than inline. So what we're doing here now is we're setting a function that we want to happen when the button is clicked. So to set that function, we use equals, and then we want to create a function. Now, when we define a function, we always have a pair of parentheses or brackets after it. Quite often, these might have some variable names in it if we're going to pass some variables to this function. But we're not doing that in this case, so really don't worry too much about those parentheses. Really think of them as things that have to come after functions. We'll see them in a lot more detail in just the next few videos. So now we've set it equal to a function, we need to define what that function is, and to do that we use our curly brackets like that. So what this is essentially saying is when my button is clicked, do whatever code I write in here. So quick challenge number 2, can you make it so that when the button is clicked, instead of changing the text, it alerts button clicked? So when the button is clicked, it alerts button clicked. Go for it. Okay, I hope you remembered how to do that. Very simple. Just alert and then brackets, because this is a function. And then we want to pass a string to the alert function. The string is just a collection of characters, which in this case we want to say button clicked. And then let's pop our semicolon at the end. All right, let's have a look. So now refresh, and there we go. Button is clicked. So that's our first bit of genuine interaction with our page using JavaScript. We've run some JavaScript when the button was clicked. That's all well and good, but what we really want to do when this button is clicked is change the text. So this is where you need to remember what we did in the previous video. So can you write the code that will update hello world to hello Rob, or hello whatever your name is, or whatever text you like. Go for it. Did you manage it? I hope so. We should have started off with document to say that we want to select something within this document. Then get element by ID, because we want to select an element by its ID. And then the element that we want to select is the one with the ID of text. And then we want to set the inner HTML of this element equal to whatever we like. So I'm going to change it to hello Rob, just as we had before. Finish it off with a semicolon. That's it. So that's exactly the same as the code that we had in the previous video. So let's save that, and fingers crossed, it'll all work. Hurrah! Fantastic. So that's some really genuine interactivity because we're updating our web page based on the actions of our user. As a very quick aside here, I'm just going to remind you of the Chrome console, which you get by right-clicking or control-clicking and then inspect the page and then clicking console. Because as you start doing more of these challenges, you'll start to get code that just doesn't do anything. Because remember, when you have an error in JavaScript, it won't show you the error on the page, it just won't do anything. So had you mistyped and typed document by mistake, then had you run it, nothing would happen on the page to tell you that you had an error, but it wouldn't work. And then here in the console is where you'll see the error. So line 21, something about document. Ah, there we go. There's the error, document. Much better. Save, refresh, click the button, all is well. So if you find yourself getting errors during the challenges, then remember to look at the console to see exactly what the error is. That will save you many miserable hours trying to figure it out yourself. In the next video then, we'll move this along and we'll see how we can change our website content in a much more advanced way than just updating some text. See you there.